So, Natalie, I know that you mostly work with adults with ADHD, but I have personally found a lot of your explanations of how ADHD can affect relationships with food really helpful for me to understand my child who has ADHD and to be able to help them and give them a bit more grace. So, for parents who are listening who have a child who's been diagnosed or they suspect they have ADHD, can you please explain why people with ADHD can find it hard to eat well?
Yeah, so there's a number of reasons why it can be really challenging. One of the really big ones has to do with hunger cues. So a lot of folks with ADHD may have poor body interoception, which means that it's either really difficult for them to feel hunger and fullness and to recognize those signals as being hunger and fullness, or additionally, the other part of it is that sometimes it's hard to prioritize those hunger cues when they do show up until they're very, very pressing. So, what that often ends up looking like is that either they don't feel hungry or they do feel hungry, but they don't know it's hunger, um, or they don't feel like it's important enough to act on until they're so hungry that they're starving. So sometimes it can create an eating pattern where all day you're not eating much. And at the end of the day, it's like, oh my God, I'm going to pass out. I'm so cranky. I'm grumpy. I'm going to eat everything in sight can sometimes be a pattern. And if folks are on ADHD medications like Adderall or Vyvanse or Ritalin, that further exacerbates this dynamic because those medications have an appetite suppressing effect, which makes it even harder to feel your body's cues. It also confuses things on the satiety side because if you get to that level of hunger, then you're more likely to eat very quickly. You're more likely to eat way past the point where you're full, and it's hard for that signal to reach your brain. Also, if you've not had enough nutrition earlier in the day, your body down regulates satiety cues. So those cues come late. They may not be correct to the amount of food that you need to feel satisfied. So sometimes that can lead to challenges on the other side of things too.
Okay, so that's why you might see children that, don't want to eat when they're playing a game or something like that. And then they're like snacking before tea, eating their tea, snacking after tea, wanting to snack at bedtime.
Yep. It's basically their body's way to compensate for the fact that their attention was on other things during the day and it just didn't feel like it was as important as the thing that's right in front of them, right? So again, it's their body's way of compensating for that calorie deficit. Our bodies are really sophisticated. So, I think even if we're not feeling physically hungry, our body may be sending craving signals or feelings like we need to eat. So that's one of the challenges I think that can come up. A lot of kids may have particularities around taste or texture. Also, if they have ADHD, especially if they have ADHD and they're somewhere on the autism spectrum, like more picky eating or requirements around certain foods. And then the other part of it too, and this is more, I think, for older folks, or older children, can be a lot of the decision fatigue and task burden that's involved in eating. So just deciding what sounds good and what you want to eat can be a very cognitively challenging thing to do. So if you're like, I got to think about all these options I want to eat and I don't know what sounds good and nothing sounds good, then it's a lot easier for them to just put off eating rather than to eat something because they know they need to eat. And if they're having to make their own meals or snacks, the tasks involved can also be too much of a barrier for them to do that, and it's just easier for their brain to put it off.
Okay, so if a child or indeed any family member, some of the parents listening as well, have ADHD, how might that show up kind of in an average day of family food?
So again, that can look like refusing snacks, refusing meals earlier in the day, only having a couple bites and then running off to go do something else. That can look like not wanting the food that's being offered, potentially. That can look like, again, that eating a lot more at night, wanting snacks before and after dinner, just like you were describing, can be a very common dynamic that can show up. Really hyperfixating on certain foods for a period of time and then never wanting to touch that again is also a very common experience. So sometimes you feel like, oh, great, we found this great snack and this great meal that my kid likes and they eat, and you're like leaning into it. And then one day it's like, absolutely not, we can't have it. Now we need something different. That can be a very frustrating experience that adults and kids can encounter. The other way that it can really show up too is that for a lot of folks who are on any neurodivergent spectrum, food can also be a way to meet stimulation needs. So, if the people are overstimulated, eating can bring that down and kind of decompress. And if you're understimulated, food can give me a pick me up. And so that shows up a lot. Like that can show up in a couple of ways. So the person who is not eating all day and then just is wanting lots and lots of snacks and really wanting to chew and munch. Sometimes that eating can be uh, a way to dissipate anxious energy and to decompress,
Okay.
especially people who are drawn kids who are drawn to, like, really big tastes and textures. So a lot of snack foods that have that really high dopamine input. And likewise, it can also help kids focus if they're doing tedious tasks. So this might be the person who needs to snack in order to get through homework. That snacking may actually be part of what's helping them finish their tasks.
I saw a stitch that you did with a psychologist about restraint collapse, about the idea that, if you're at work all day being on your best behaviour, or for children being on their best behaviour at school, when they get home, obviously their behaviour can go downhill a little bit.
Absolutely. So when we're thinking about overstimulation, that's the dynamic that we're talking about. Going and managing all of those inputs through the day, trying to stay focused, trying to keep it together, having to manage all of the different tasks they have to deal with in school. That is so cognitively draining. That just completely tanks executive function. It's like having in a really, really loud room by the end of the day. And so coming home and dropping all of that need to perform a certain way or be a certain way is so necessary, and food is a really, really, really helpful tool in helping dissipate that energy that's been, building up because of their need to mask.
So having some grace for the after school snack being more comforting is probably a good way to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Having some grace, I think recognizing that food is a tool is really important. It's not just, oh, my kid likes lots of snacks. It's this is functionally serving the way that their brain is working. And maybe there are ways that you can talk about skill building to find other things that also calm their nervous system that are also going to provide that stimulatory benefit. That can be really helpful to put in. But I always, and I say this for adults, but I think it's especially true for children, not coming at that work of how else can we support you and your needs. The goal of that shouldn't be that you're never going to snack, because then we're vilifying food and we're trying to replace something. It should be, okay, snacks part of it, and then what else can we help with regulation so that you have a robust toolbox.
So giving people a menu of ways to help themselves rather than suggesting that eating for emotional or stimulation needs is somehow wrong.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And even eating, you can think about what that looks like. Can we explore lots of different foods so that you have a plate full of different things, including the preferred stuff, right? So can it be chips or crisps for the UK audience? Can it be those? And can it also be other things that are crunchy, crispy that might help meet the nutrition needs as well? So it's a little bit of everything.
Yeah, that's great. And have you got any other suggestions for practical ways that parents can help their kids to understand their needs when they're getting prepared to kind of leave home? So thinking ahead to how they're going to be able to like cope at college or when they're living by themselves.
Absolutely. So the first thing is that I always like to emphasize is that no eating is bad. It's doesn't matter how you're eating or why you're meeting some need, and that's really important to acknowledge. And so I think that sometimes people can get into the mindset of snacking is bad and therefore you shouldn't do it, or this kind of eating is bad, or these foods are bad and you shouldn't do it, as opposed to really thinking about what is it that my brain needs and what is it that my body needs and how can I best meet those together. So for example, for the kiddo who's going off to college and really needs food to like snacking to help them focus. I mean, that was absolutely me. Um, not vilifying that and trying to stop it, but saying, okay, if I'm using this as a tool and it's okay that I'm snacking, how can I make that look like something that's going to give me that same benefit, but maybe is also going to give me other benefits and meet other needs as well, right? And I think that for a lot of folks who do use food as tools, the framework, I see this on TikTok sometimes, and I love it, is the have what you want, add what you need, can be a really gentle way of approaching that. It's just how can we expand foods and increase variety as opposed to necessarily vilifying or removing or replacing.
So when my daughter went to uni and she was obviously living in, very small university accommodation with, very poor kitchen facilities and so on, she used to really struggle to come out of her room to go and cook a meal for lunchtime. But she had a little fridge in her room with snacks in. And so we added in things like little chicken satay things and yogurts and roast. It wasn't all kind of, although there were crisps and the crisps were fine, there were kind of snacky items, crackers and cheese and so on, but we added in a bit of a range so that if she was sitting in a room and couldn't face going into that communal kitchen because she was too done with people, that there was more of a range for her to pick from. Is that the kind of thing that you're thinking?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like, how would you think about nutrition if snacking is the plan?
Yeah.
Right? So I think sometimes we go snacking shouldn't be the plan, so we're not gonna do any of that. and then we're left with nothing, and then we go back to the snack foods as opposed to saying, okay, my plan is snacking. My plan is that it's okay and I'm going to do it. What would it look like if that was the plan and that was going to be plan A and not an unfortunate consequence of not being prepared? So exactly that, right? How can we have things available that are going to meet a variety of needs in a very low pressure way and accept that that's what our brain needs sometimes and not trying to fit a specific eating pattern, I think is really important. The other part that I think is really helpful is to have there be a connection in young folks' mind to nourishment and how that affects your executive function. Because I think for a lot of people that under eating during the day and not prioritizing eating during the day, if that's the pattern that folks have, can have a really big impact on executive function, on the ability to focus, on mental clarity, on our emotional state, on how overstimulated we might get by the end of the day. And so I think that for some people, it's hard for your brain to prioritize eating if it doesn't feel pressing. But if you can connect that eating is going to make you function better, sometimes that's very helpful in having them figure out, okay, how can I get in a small snack here and a small snack there to get more fuel for my brain earlier in the day, right? But, also supporting them and saying it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be this perfect meal. It can be small snacks. And if they struggle with figuring out where to put that in, transitions between activities can be a great place to put cues to remind them just to have a granola bar or have a yogurt or have something like that to keep them
Okay,
going.
so if they've got something in their backpack, if they're walking between lectures or they're going from their job to the bus or any of those things, those are a great think about putting food into those moments.
Yes, exactly.
That's
Exactly.
brilliant. That's incredibly helpful. I really like the fact that your advice is very non-judgmental. It's kind of do what works for you in a way that
Mhm.
isn't kind of applying an almost orthorexic kind of filter to things, which a lot of the advice online can do.
Yeah, yeah. I think that a lot of the health advice is very, this is the right way and you have to do it the right way and you have to figure out how to do it the right way. But I feel like a lot of times that pursuit is so overwhelming and so exhausting that a lot of times when people do it, they try to fit those food rules that it backfires in a big way. And I think I have seen this especially in some of the younger clients that I've worked with. Like I've worked with some folks who are in college and it's just the task burden and the mental effort that's required to do that is so much that they become avoidant, and then it usually, in my experience, can often lead to binging in the evening time on foods that maybe don't make them feel super good, and then it can become a cycle as opposed to saying, "Okay, what can I eat? What what will I enjoy, but maybe will be a step towards some of my other goals?" And just getting those small steps in place and realizing it doesn't have to be all or nothing often leads people to a much healthier and a lifestyle that feels better because it's not so mentally draining to think about and upkeep and all of that.